Two men who had changed the world stood face to face, and for a moment, words became unnecessary. It was 1990, and Nelson Mandela had walked out of Victor Verster prison just months earlier, blinking into the South African sunlight after 27 years behind bars. The world had watched in awe as this man, who had entered prison in the prime of his life, emerged as an elder statesman with gray hair and unbroken spirit. He had become a symbol of resistance, of dignity, of the human capacity to endure the unendurable. And now he was meeting Muhammad Ali, another man who had sacrificed everything for his principles, another man who had refused to bend when the world demanded that he break. The meeting took place in a formal setting, surrounded by cameras and journalists and the machinery of celebrity that followed both men wherever they went. Officials stood at attention. Photographers jostled for position. The air was thick with anticipation and the chemical smell of flash powder. But when Ali and Mandela finally came face to face, something remarkable happened. The noise seemed to fade. The cameras seemed to disappear. Two men looked into each other's eyes, and in that exchange, decades of struggle were acknowledged without a single word being spoken. Imagine yourself in that room, the tension of history pressing against the walls, the weight of two extraordinary lives suddenly occupying the same space, the feeling that you are witnessing something that will be remembered long after everyone present has turned to dust. Ali extended his trembling hand. Parkinson's disease had been his companion for nearly 6 years now, slowing his movements, thickening his speech, stealing piece by piece the physical grace that had once made him dance like a butterfly. But his eyes were still Ali's eyes, bright and knowing, and full of a fire that no disease could extinguish. Mandela took the hand and held it. His grip was firm despite his 71 years, despite the decades of hard labor on Robben Island, despite everything that had been done to his body in the name of apartheid. He looked at Ali with an expression that those present would never forget. Recognition. Not the recognition of celebrity meeting celebrity, of famous man greeting famous man. This was something deeper. This was the recognition of one warrior seeing another, of one survivor acknowledging a fellow traveler on the hardest road a human being can walk. "You are my hero," Mandela said, his voice carrying that distinctive cadence that the world was just beginning to know. "When I was in prison, I thought of you often." Close your eyes and feel the weight of those words. A man who had spent 27 years in a cell, who had been denied news of the outside world, who had watched friends die and causes falter and hope flicker like a candle in the wind. And in his darkest moments, he had thought of Muhammad Ali. According to those who were close to Mandela, he had followed Ali's career from his prison cell through the fragments of information that reached him. He had heard about the young champion who had refused to fight in Vietnam. He had learned about the years of exile, the stripped title, the government persecution, and he had recognized something of himself in this boxer from Louisville who had chosen principle over profit. They were different men from different worlds. Mandela was a lawyer, an intellectual, a political strategist who had organized resistance movements and negotiated with enemies. Ali was an athlete, a performer, a man who spoke in poetry and riddles and bold declarations of his own greatness. On the surface, they had little in common, but beneath the surface, they were brothers. Let your breathing slow as you consider what connected them. Both had been willing to sacrifice their freedom for their beliefs. Both had faced the full weight of government persecution and refused to yield. Both had watched their best years slip away in exile or imprisonment, paying the price that principle demands. And both had emerged from their trials not diminished, but enlarged, not broken, but somehow more whole. Ali spoke slowly, each word a small victory over the disease that was claiming his voice. "I watched you," he said. "When you came out of that prison, I saw your face. You were not defeated. After 27 years, you were not defeated." Mandela smiled, that famous smile that had somehow survived decades of darkness. "Neither were you, my brother. Neither were you." Picture the two of them standing together for the photographs that would circle the globe. Mandela in his elegant suit, tall and dignified, his posture that of a man who had learned patience in the hardest possible school. Ali in his own formal attire, his frame still powerful despite the disease, his face showing the cost of a lifetime of battles. The cameras flashed, the journalists shouted questions, but between the two men, a private conversation continued in glances and small gestures, in the pressure of hands that had known struggle, and the meeting of eyes that had seen too much to be fooled by anything superficial. According to those who witnessed the meeting, Mandela asked Ali about his boxing career, about the fights that had made him legend. But the questions were not the typical fan questions about knockouts and championships. Mandela wanted to know about the moments of doubt, the times when Ali had wondered if he could continue, the private struggles that the public never saw. Ali answered honestly, more honestly than he usually spoke to strangers. He talked about the fear before the first Liston fight, when everyone expected him to be destroyed. He talked about the years of exile, when he had wondered if he would ever fight again. He talked about the morning he woke up and realized that his hands were trembling and would not stop. "But you continued," Mandela said. "You always continued." "What else could I do?" Ali replied. "Stop being who I am?" Breathe deeply now and feel the truth of that question settling into your heart. What else could either of them have done? They were who they were. Mandela could no more have abandoned his fight against apartheid than Ali could have agreed to fight in a war he believed was wrong. They were prisoners of their own principles, in the best possible sense of that phrase. The formal meeting lasted perhaps an hour, interrupted by photographs and brief interviews and the constant demands of media. But those who were there said that something deeper was happening beneath the surface, a conversation that continued in the spaces between public statements. When the cameras finally withdrew, when the officials stepped back, when the two men were given a few moments of something approaching privacy, they sat together and talked about faith. Mandela spoke of the Christianity that had sustained him through the darkest years, of the prayers he had whispered in his cell when hope seemed impossible. Ali spoke of Islam, of the conversion that had changed his name and his life, of the peace he found in submission to a power greater than himself. They were different faiths, different traditions, different ways of understanding the divine. But in that room, those differences dissolved into something more fundamental. They were both men who had found strength in forces they could not see. They were both men who had trusted in something larger than their own survival. "The body can be imprisoned," Mandela said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "But the spirit, if it is strong enough, remains free." Ali nodded slowly. He understood. His body was becoming its own kind of prison, trapping a mind that still danced, and a spirit that still soared. But he was learning what Mandela had learned long ago. The cage is not the self. The limitation is not the essence. What matters most cannot be touched by any jailer, any disease, any force of oppression. Close your eyes and let that wisdom settle over you like a blanket. The spirit remains free. No matter what happens to the body, no matter what walls are built around us, something essential cannot be captured. Something in us belongs to a realm beyond reach. The meeting was drawing to a close. Both men had other obligations, other demands on their time. The machinery of their famous lives was grinding forward, ready to sweep them up and carry them to their next appointments. But before they parted, something happened that the cameras did not capture. According to those who were close enough to see, Mandela leaned in and whispered something in Ali's ear. Ali listened, his face serious, and then slowly nodded. A small smile crossed his features, the first genuine smile some observers had seen from him all day. What did Mandela say? Neither man ever revealed it publicly. It remained between them, a private moment in a lifetime of public moments, a secret shared between two brothers who had earned the right to keep some things for themselves. Perhaps it was a blessing. Perhaps it was a joke. Perhaps it was simply an acknowledgement of all they had both been through and all they had both become. Whatever it was theirs alone. Let yourself drift into the moments after their parting. Ali walking slowly toward his waiting car, his entourage surrounding him, the trembling in his hands more pronounced after the exertion of the meeting. Mandela moving in the opposite direction, toward the endless obligations of a man who had become the living symbol of an entire nation's struggle. They would meet again in the years to come, at various events and gatherings of the world's notable figures. But those later meetings would never carry the same weight as this first one. This moment when two legends recognized each other as something more than celebrities. They had seen each other truly. And in a world that often reduces its heroes to headlines and sound bites, that kind of seeing is rare and precious. Breathe deeply now as the story settles toward its close. The meeting room is empty. The cameras have moved on to other subjects. The journalists have filed their stories, capturing what could be captured in words and photographs. But something remains in that room, even after everyone has left. A residue of recognition, a trace of the connection that formed when two extraordinary spirits touched, if only briefly, before continuing on their separate journeys. Mandela would go on to become the first black president of South Africa, leading his nation through a transition that many had believed impossible. He would become a global symbol of reconciliation, showing the world that enemies could become partners, and that hatred could be transformed into hope. Ali would continue his own journey, slower now, but no less meaningful. He would light the Olympic torch in Atlanta, showing the world that greatness transcends the body. He would devote himself to humanitarian causes, traveling to war zones and disaster areas, using his name to shine light on suffering that might otherwise be ignored. Both men would face their own mortality with the same courage they had shown throughout their lives. Mandela would pass away in 2013, at the age of 95, mourned by millions who had never met him but felt they knew him. Ali would follow 3 years later, in 2016, finally released from the body that Parkinson's had claimed but never conquered. And somewhere, in whatever place the spirits of such men go when their work on earth is done, perhaps they are together again. Perhaps they are continuing the conversation that began in that meeting room in 1990, the conversation about struggle and faith and the price of principle. Perhaps they are laughing about secrets that will never be revealed. Listen now to the silence that follows great meetings, the echo of voices that have fallen silent, the lingering presence of spirits that have moved on, the strange sense that something important happened here, even if we cannot fully articulate what it was. Some connections transcend explanation. Some recognitions go deeper than words can reach. When Mandela looked at Ali, he saw his own struggles reflected. When Ali looked at Mandela, he saw a brother in resistance, a fellow traveler on the road less taken. And we, who witnessed their meeting across the years, see something that gives us hope. We see that the human spirit can endure almost anything. We see that principle is worth protecting, even at the highest cost. We see that two men from opposite sides of the world can recognize each other as family, because they have both paid the price of freedom. Let yourself drift towards sleep now, carrying their example with you. The world they lived in was often cruel, often unjust, often stacked against everything they believed in. And yet they persisted, and yet they prevailed, and yet they stood together. In a meeting room in 1990, two lions who had refused to be tamed. That is their gift to us. Not just their victories, but their refusals. Not just their triumphs, but their sacrifices. Not just their fame, but their integrity. Sleep now, as the meeting ends and the legends part. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges, its own moments when you must choose between comfort and conscience. When those moments come, remember these two men who chose conscience every time. Remember that the spirit remains free. Remember that some connections are eternal. And remember, always, that the measure of a life is not what was gained, but what was given. Not what was won, but what was risked. Not how long we lived, but how deeply we meant it. The room is empty now. The cameras are dark. But somewhere, two voices are still talking. Two brothers are still together, and their conversation has only just begun.